I'm Claudine Wong, joining you from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm joined by Kristen Fuarichi Fong, joining us from Alameda and sharing a very personal story. Hi, Kristen.
Good afternoon.
So we are, when I look at you, I think, oh, great, she looks so healthy. And that's a good thing because you've been down a pretty rough road. You have gone through coronavirus, firsthand of what that feels like, what it means for your family, and kind of how scary it was. And I appreciate you talking about this because so many people, wonder, all the symptoms are so varied between people. It can be kind of confusing. I mean, a lot of people have said, do I have it? Do I not have it? What does it mean?
Sure.
Tell me what the first signs that you thought, uh-oh, I'm not feeling well. I wonder what this is. When did that happen?
Yeah. Um, Actually, so I'm a teacher, and we've been like inundated with Zooms. It seems like 24/7. But it was the Thursday before Easter Sunday, and I thought it was just seriously Zoom fatigue. I was wiped out Thursday. I just had zero energy at the end of the day. Wasn't feeling too great, but it was just more fatigue. Friday, same thing, super tired. And then Saturday, I started feeling kind of achy. And it was just like the kind of like the body aches where you think you have the flu, like my scalp hurt, everything just hurt.
Now,
Um,
interestingly, you were talking about you're doing Zooms. At this point, you'd been sheltering in place for a while, being very careful, because I think as
yes,
longer we shelter in place, we feel like
yeah.
we've been pretty, we've been taking a lot of precautions. Were you taking all those precautions, limiting where you were going, doing all of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I hadn't been to school or work since the 13th of March. And as far as sheltering in place, we were doing everything to the T. So generally, on a good day, I'm a germaphobe. And so just like with all the COVID-19 precautions that they were suggesting that we all take, the only outings that we were going on were shopping, grocery shopping. And then even that, we were trying to limit it to once every week and a half or 2 weeks.
Right. So if you were a germaphobe, you're pretty good about it. Tell me about your family, because there's more than just you in your house.
Yeah, sure. So I've got my husband and my daughter Mia. She's a freshman in high school, and my middle son Cameron, he's a junior, and then my oldest son is Ryan, and he's a freshman at Cal this year. And it's been interesting. The kids have weathered it pretty well. I've also got my parents that are really close by. So my parents live about 3 blocks away.
Okay.
And I mean, we consider them part of our sort of nucleus of our
Circle.
family.
Yeah.
We do so many things together. But yeah, like the virus and the sheltering in place and the shopping, a lot of that was all impacted,
But was
by.
everyone being pretty good? Because I've seen, you hear people talking about teenagers going out. Everyone, when you had gotten sick, everyone was following the rules.
Everyone was following the rules. The boys have been busy, and actually Mia too have all been busy keeping up with their schoolwork. Boys have been online with their games. So yeah, I mean, and again, because of social media, they've been keeping in touch with their friends that way. But I mean, it's even been to the point where like going out for like takeout, they'd want to go to In-N-Out just to get food there. My husband and I just felt a little leery, even just getting in the car to go through a drive-through and just possibly being exposed to whatever might be out there that the workers, may have that are cooking the food.
Yeah.
And so we had limited everything. Like they were dying to go out for boba. None of
No,
that.
yeah, you said no. So you were pretty strict. So when you started feeling sick, did you think, I mean, you thought it was Zoom fatigue, but did you think at all this could possibly be COVID-19 because you were so
No.
good about sheltering in place?
Yeah, so on Easter Sunday, that's when I developed a fever. And it wasn't really particularly high. It was about 100.8. Never got it higher than that. And just thinking in terms of like the fever and the chills and the achiness, I called my doctor And that Sunday, she called me back and prescribed Tamiflu. So she wasn't sure. I mean, we've all had the flu before. And that's the thing with COVID, is that there are so many symptoms that overlap
Did it feel like the
between.
feel for you? I mean, did it
Totally
feel
felt
like
like
that?
the
Yeah.
flu.
Mm.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely felt
So it
like the
all made
flu.
sense. Tamiflu made sense to you.
Sure, it did. And my doctor, who's been amazing, prescribed it as a just in case. Let's start you on this right away because it's accessible. And so she prescribed the Tamiflu. Started taking that on Sunday, but she also said, based on my symptoms, that she wanted me to go to get tested for COVID. And so I did that Monday morning, the day after, and I had, that was one dose of Tamiflu that I had taken. Of course, I hadn't really done much of anything yet. Went to the drive-through testing location, had that done, and really did not expect a positive result at all. But the test came back, gosh, within I think 6 hours or so. And then I got the phone call from my doctor, and she said that I had tested positive for COVID-19.
Did
And
that
then
scare you? I mean, we've had the flu before, and so people who have had the flu before figure, okay, I've been through this before, I recovered from it. So while we know the flu can be deadly, there's a lot of people who have just had bouts of it, and it's just been terrible sickness. But
mm-hmm.
with corona, there's that fear that while people are asymptomatic, the breathing and the fear, like I have not had symptoms, but I will tell you, there are some nights where I'm like, how am I breathing? Am I breathing okay? Because that part scares me. Did it change the way you looked at all your symptoms?
It did. And I think for me, my doctor, again, I think that's the thing with COVID, is that there are so many unknowns, so much information that's coming in on a daily basis. But, I think my doctor reassured me, or I felt reassured in that, at least with the symptoms that I was presenting at the time, I never had any kind of respiratory issue. My breathing wasn't affected. I didn't have shortness of breath. And I think because of that wasn't part of like the onset of symptoms. My doctor was somewhat hopeful that it was going to be sort of a mild case. Yep. The part that I think was the most worrisome were days 8 through 12. And so I'm sure you've heard that what studies are showing is that you can be on an upswing, you can be feeling somewhat recovered, and then somewhere between days 8 and 12, you take a turn for the worse.
And did you?
Nope.
So that's luckily what you were waiting for it.
I was, and for me, yeah, and that was kind of the scary part. Is like, is something gonna happen? But just really for me, I'm just so grateful that it was a very mild case, because as each day went on, I felt better.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Had you not taken the test, and had you not had that swab, which I've been told is quite uncomfortable, and gotten someone to tell you for sure that you tested positive for coronavirus, and you were looking back on that sickness, would you think it was coronavirus, or would you have said, no, I'm pretty sure it was probably the flu?
Flu, absolutely. And the thing about that is that my husband, so in terms of like our family timeline with the virus, my husband, who's also been sheltering in place, had been ill around the beginning of April.
Okay.
And so he had similar symptoms. He didn't have a fever, although, well, he says he didn't have a fever. He didn't measure his temperature, so he could have. Right. He didn't feel like he had a fever, but he had fatigue. He also developed a cough and chilled and achy. And
so
again,
he had this before you?
He did have it before me. So he had it about 10 days before I did. And for him, again, he thought it was a flu or a cold. Didn't even register that it could have been COVID.
Did he ever get tested?
I'm sorry?
Did he ever get tested?
Yes. So after I was tested, and after my test result came back positive that Monday, I think it was the 13th of April, we have the same doctor, and she then suggested that he also get tested. So he went in on Tuesday and the day after me, and his test also came back positive. And so then that's when, whenever you test positive, it triggers phone calls from the Department of Health for the county. And so we were getting a lot of phone calls to find out like exposure, what we had been doing, if there was anyone else that was sick in our household. But that's when they termed the word, or they used the word vector. And so we were trying to figure out, well, who was the vector in the case that has arisen in our house. And I believe that it was actually my husband.
Your husband.
So
Thank you
I
to your
think he
husband,
was,
right? Does he have any
yeah,
idea where he might have contracted it?
no, because the only outings that we had gone on were the same ones, to the store, grocery shopping, and that is it. So
But
he too, yeah, he's been off of work as well. So he works for Chevron, and he's been off of work since the week after me. So yeah, I
for
mean,
enough time before that. And I imagine that's a frustrating, because we're all going through these these precautionary measures, hoping that it protects us. And so when, a story like yours is a word of caution that we are all still vulnerable, but we're just not sure where. Your kids, were they tested as well?
yes. So my kids were tested. They were tested towards the end of that first week after I was tested. And they all of their tests came back negative. And my oldest son, Ryan, the one who goes to Cal, was actually given the antibody test as well, which was kind of interesting. And the reason, I guess the backstory behind that is that when he came home from Cal, when they had to move out of the dorms, he had come home with this rash. When we called the doctor, it just appeared to be what I thought was like hand, foot, and mouth minus the mouth, but it was this rash on the palms of his hands and his feet. And at that time, his doctor said, yeah, it sounds like hand, foot, and mouth. I mean, it could be common in a dorm situation. And that was that. And so it wasn't until I reached out back to the pediatricians and the doctor that day, when I said, can the kids get tested as well? Because my husband and I came back positive. The pediatrician had just read that very morning a new medical journal article that was talking about how young people seem to be presenting with this strange rash on their hands and feet. And so then he thought, so maybe it was Ryan that came back, and that
maybe he's the vector. Yes.
the vector of it all.
Who is the vector? Yes.
Exactly. And so that was another reason why, and that had been, I don't know, had been about a good almost a month prior to all of us getting sick. So some amount of time had passed, and that's why the pediatrician had really recommended that he get the antibody tests, so that if he did in fact have COVID when he came home back in March, he would have recovered, but an antibody test hopefully would have shown if he had it or not.
And what did the test show?
That too came back negative.
So in our search for answers, I should ask, because we have these pictures, did your parents by any chance get tested as well? Because obviously they're in a higher risk category based.
Sure, they are. No, they have not been tested, and they were the ones that we were most concerned about, just because they live so close by, and our lives are so intertwined. We were doing a lot of shopping for them, dropping off food. And I mean,
but they have no symptoms. They're healthy and
they're totally healthy. We had maintained our social distance when we were dropping off food, had been inside their house and everything. But
well, so is that confusing to you? How long did it take for you? You went through 8 through 12. You said you had a fairly good upswing. How long until you felt better?
It was about, I would say, a week.
A week.
It was just a week of feeling pretty lousy.
So if you, yeah, I mean, and pretty lousy. I mean, if you compare it to when you've had bouts of the flu, how did it compare?
This was much more severe. The fatigue was ridiculous. just exhaustion from simple tasks or actually doing nothing. So as you know, as we're all sheltering in place, there isn't a whole lot that we can do anyways. And when you test positive for COVID, you are then isolated into your own room. And so I had spent um, about 9 days in my room
Yeah.
without, really without any interaction with my kids. My husband was actually isolating with me since he too had tested positive. Um, but, just being stuck in your room doing nothing was exhausting.
Yeah, I imagine just mentally exhausting in addition to the physically exhausting. And fortunately, your kids are old enough that they could kind of fend for themselves while you were in there. Were your husband's symptoms very similar to yours then?
They were very, very flu-like.
Flu-like, except for the
Yeah.
loss of smell. You said that is one of the.
Yes. So he did not have a loss of smell or taste. I guess I'm the not so lucky one to have been hit with that part. But yeah, similar symptoms, very
And
similar
similar
symptoms.
recovery timeline.
Yes, he too recovered very, very quickly. He has asthma, and so he developed the cough part, but again, it resolved
Yeah,
quickly.
which is such great news. But the I think we're always trying to take lessons learned and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how we can learn from your experience to better protect ourselves, better to have best practices when we're out. But I think that the hard part about your story is that it's confusing. It seems like you're doing everything that health officials are asking you to do, and yet still here it comes making its way through your community.
Yeah, we so I had decided to share on social media with my friends in our family what my experience was. Um, and part of that, or a big part of that, I think, is again, like what you were saying, sort of the education part, trying to, I think, bring a face to this virus that so many people, there are so many unknowns. I didn't know anyone until myself, until we, had experienced the coronavirus firsthand. I don't know anyone. I know now one other person that has tested positive. Um, but again, it's one of those things where you read about it and it seems so far removed, yet it's something that we all fear, I think, on a daily basis, something
Right.
that we're all trying to protect ourselves from. And I think, again, that was also the reason why I wanted to share is that, yes, we did everything that we could, thinking that we would be able to prevent this and not have this happen. But the one thing, and again, I don't know how much this could have contributed to getting sick, but the one area that I feel like I didn't, or I wasn't as scrupulous about, was after doing the shopping. So we would shop, take our own wipes, wipe down the cart, wear gloves, would put the mask on. It was like a snow day, but it was a
Yes.
corona day when we would go shopping. But there were a couple of times when I didn't, when we came back home and I didn't wipe all of the groceries down. I didn't wipe all the packaging down. And I'm sure you've seen
Well, there have been some various
stories.
recommendations, right, where they say do it and then they say you don't have to do it and there's no evidence of
Exactly.
it, and that, so it can be confusing. I still do it even though, because once I was told to do it, it's hard for me to stop doing it.
Sure, sure. And I think that that's wise. I mean, again, there are so many unknowns that we don't really know. They think that they know how long it can live on the surface, but again, I think my takeaway from this is that we need to do what we can, um, even if it's just for peace of our own
Yeah.
mind, peace of mind for ourselves, to say, yeah, I wiped down the packages. I, didn't take my own grocery bags in, and just because I think a huge part of the coronavirus is also this whole lack of like control,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's unknown. We don't have control over it. We thought we were doing everything right, but
Right.
then here we are.
Well, I think there are
So
some, the difficulties are you don't know where you got it. You were doing all the things correctly, but there are some things that did work. You're communicating with your doctor. She got you medicine, but also got you through the testing. The drive-through testing, would you say that was a easy process or not so easy?
super easy.
Super easy.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
working well. Then I would think isolating in your house also protected your children. I mean, you would think, however, maybe you got in the store, maybe you got it some other way. I'm not, obviously we don't know,
Mhm.
but we do know that apparently isolating your house, even though you guys live in the same space, was enough to keep your kids from getting infected.
It was. We were really grateful for that. But I think again, also in terms of where did we get sick, I think it points to the importance of the contact tracing that they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about and the importance of that right now too. I mean, in some ways it's kind of like hindsight, it's 50-50, but I
But
think that
wouldn't
it
you
is
like to
important.
know, right? Wouldn't
I
you
would.
love to know, like
I
where it all, if you're not going to the drive-through and you're not going to the grocery store all the time and you're wearing your mask, like
right.
where so we can prevent it. That's basically it.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that's an important step that that they're trying to make right now in the right
Yeah.
direction, trying to put resources into that. And then also just all the research. So like today, this morning, I got a letter from Stanford Medicine, and it was a letter that my husband actually received also, and they're doing a genomic investigation of COVID-19. And so they're looking at patients who tested positive, who would be interested in opting into their study. It doesn't require any further testing. It's more of a conversation, but they're looking at how is this being transmitted in Northern California. They want to know what we did prior to getting sick, are the possible exposures, just I guess helpful demographic information that we can provide. And I think also an important next step.
Are you guys going to do that then?
We would like to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point, whatever we can do to help prevent the transmission of this, we want to be able to help in any other way. We are also interested in looking, and this isn't for a few weeks out, but really looking at donating plasma. And so that also is another study that they're doing, whether or not the plasma of previously infected
Right.
patients will help those who are um, more severely affected by COVID-19. And so that's something that I don't think we can do for probably another 3 weeks. But, again, I think it's just a sense of like what we want to be able to do to slow this, prevent it, and help those who are currently being affected by it.
Absolutely, because the antibodies and the treatment and the vaccine all top on our minds if we're going to get back to life as normal. Well, Kristen, I am
Exactly.
so glad that you are feeling well. I hope your smell and your comes
Thank
back
you.
sooner than later. I'm glad your family is healthy, and I think we all appreciate the fact that you are sharing your story and that you are willing to do the plasma and the genome and all the tracing, because we have more questions than we have answers these days, and so the more we continue this conversation, the better.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to ask these important questions.
Well, Kristen Fuarici Fong, thanks so much for joining us. Stay healthy, and I guess I will take your advice and continue to wipe down those groceries. It
Yeah,
makes the trip to the store
please
so
do.
much longer. When I get home, I look at my trunk and I'm like, all right, here we go, step 12. But
It's
we
worth it.
we're gonna do what we can. All right, thanks so much, Kristen.
Good. Thank you.